Mr. McFarland has our prayer and our pledge. Mr. McFarland?
If you'll bow with me. Father, we thank you for this night, the ability that we have to be here. Lord, the ability we have to represent the residents of Murfreesboro. Give us discernment. Lord, give us wisdom for the decisions we make for your people. Lord, we ask you just to be with us and bless us. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council, March 4th, 2010. We have with us a few guests with Youth Leadership Rutherford, and I'd like to recognize Taylor Bailey, Kayla Swatzel, Madeline P., Kayla Walker, and Hunter Swenson, who are fulfilling a requirement with Youth Leadership Rutherford. So we're happy you're here tonight. Welcome, and please come back, even when you don't have to. All right, a couple of things that are going on in our community I'd like to make everyone just aware of. March the 9th from 4 till 6 p.m. at Patterson Center, we'll be having an open meeting regarding the medical zoning around our hospital, existing hospital, Middle Tennessee Medical Center. That meeting will be at Patterson Center, 4 to 6 p.m. We're trying to get the public's input on what you feel like might happen in the zone around the hospital and kind of what we should do with that medical zoning, which has specific uses allowed and other uses are disallowed in that particular zone. So if you are interested in the medical zoning category around Middle Tennessee Medical Center, and certainly as they move toward relocating out toward our new hospital on Medical Center Parkway, I think many people will take an active interest in that. Please come 4 to 6 on March the 9th. That's a Tuesday night at Patterson Center, 4 to 6 p.m. And help us and our planning staff talk about the medical zoning around Middle Tennessee Medical Center. On March the 16th, which I believe is a Tuesday night also, we're going to be discussing the current planning that we have underway for the Manny Avenue project, and that goes from College Street and Manny Avenue all the way to Broad Street and Manny Avenue along our South Manny Avenue corridor. And I think the public would be engaged and be very interested in seeing what's been planned and what we intend to do along that area. And we're kind of open for some suggestions from the neighborhood and from others who use that corridor to what might enhance that redevelopment along South Manny Avenue. So that is going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. on March the 16th at Patterson Community Center. So we hope the public will be interested in both of those projects, March the 9th from 4 to 6 at Patterson on medical zoning, and March the 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. on the Manny Avenue, South Manny corridor, both of those at Patterson Center. If you have any questions regarding that, you can call our planning department at 893-6441, and someone would be happy to work with you, answer any questions you may have. Council members, you have before you your consent agenda. If there are any questions regarding the consent agenda, now would be a good time to bring those up. If not, I'll accept a motion. Yes, Mr. McFarland.
On the consent agenda, we have an item about some additional funds that we're paying on a community block development grant home. Do we go through the process? What process do we go through reviewing that to make sure that it's not that it's in order for the costs?
I believe Mr. Callow is going to use his experience with the program to make sure that the costs are in line. Obviously, with a rehabilitation, sometimes you'll get into work behind the wall that's not discovered during the initial work write-up, and sometimes these things do happen.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion then that we accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You also have before you tonight the minutes of the meeting February 25th, 2010. If you've had an opportunity to review those minutes, are there any additions or deletions to those minutes?
Mayor, seeing none, I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion to approve the minutes of the February 25th meeting. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to amend Appendix A zoning, Section 2924, in Charts 1 and 4 dealing with postmortem establishments.
Mayor, I move for approval on third and final reading. Second.
We have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Medical Center Parkway to Commercial Fringe CF District.
Move for its approval on third reading.
Second.
You have a motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Lascassas Pike and Winlawn Drive to local commercial CL district.
Move for passage on third and final reading.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on January the 28th, 2010, we'll now conduct a public hearing to consider amending Appendix A zoning Section 2, 5, 7, 13, 19, 24, and 29 pertaining to subdivision regulations and street design specifications. The planning staff is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the February 14th, 2010 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome, Ms. Logan.
Good evening, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. Thank you. In July of 2009, the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve the new subdivision regulations and standard street specifications. The current street specifications were last updated in 1974, and many changes in design and development and technology have occurred over the past 36 years. The subdivision regulations and street design specifications are an attempt to modernize those standards while still maintaining many of the qualities and design features being utilized by the current design and development community. At the time of passage of the subdivision regulations this past summer, it was noted by the city's legal department that there were provisions in the city code that are in conflict with the new subdivision regulations. Action by you, the City Council, is required to amend these provisions or in some cases even repeal provisions from our city code. The following three ordinances that you will hear tonight will consider for public hearing have all been prepared to make these necessary changes to the document so that they complement each other and remove any contradictions. Once these ordinances are reviewed and approved by you, the subdivision regulations and standard street specifications will become valid upon ordinance effectiveness. The first ordinance presented before you tonight, which has been included in your packet, will amend Appendix A of the Murfreesboro City Code, which is the zoning ordinance, Sections 2, 5, 7, 13, 19, 24, and 29. The revision is necessary to change the definitions for subdivision regulations and street design specifications, amend the checklist for site plan review and requirements, and correct capitalization errors throughout the ordinance. Also, items required have been listed out for easier use, statements have been added to address remedies for violating the subdivision regulations, and a statement of clarification has been added addressing exceptions to plan developments as they relate to subdivision regulations and the zoning regulations. The Planning Department and legal staffs are available to answer any questions that you may have. The Planning Commission approved these ordinance changes by unanimous vote. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Ms. Logan on this recommendation and these amendments to the zoning ordinance? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. If anyone is here wishing to speak for or against these amendments to the zoning ordinance, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we will consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to amend Appendix A zoning, Sections 2, 5, 7, 13, 19, 24, and 29, pertaining to subdivision regulations and street design specifications.
Mayor, move for passage on first reading.
This will be third reading.
Third reading.
Mayor, I will second that, and I will point out that in the Planning Commission minutes that Mr. Adlott felt like this was just a housekeeping matter, so I'll second that.
I think he learned that from Ms. McGannon. I believe he did. All right, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on January 28, 2010, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 28 Streets and Sidewalks, Sections 28, 1, 8, 11, 31, 32, 33, 41, 42, 45, and 46, dealing with subdivision regulations and street design specifications. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the February 14, 2010 issue of the local newspaper. Ms. Logan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Again, the second ordinance tonight is to amend Chapter 28 of our city municipal code. A section has been added at the beginning of the section for the regulations that pertains also to the Planning Commission's level of authority. We have reworded the right-of-way section pertaining to obstructions, that they must require a permit, and that warning signs and devices must comply with the latest edition of the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Further information has been added pertaining to street rights-of-way and pavement requirements, a section on the installation of underground infrastructure, a section pertaining to the maintenance and warranty of our public infrastructure, and language has also been added that sidewalks are to be constructed in accordance with the design standards that are now being set forth in the new subdivision regulations and street specifications. There have also been a few grammatical changes throughout these ordinances and some heading changes. These regulations have been written so that if the subdivision regulations are updated from time to time, which we believe they probably will be, that it doesn't cause or create any conflicts with our city code. Again, members of the staff are available to you if you have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Logan? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time, and anyone wishing to speak for or against these amendments to the street and sidewalks section, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to amend Chapter 28 Streets and Sidewalks, Section 28, 1, 8, 11, 31, 32, 33, 41, 42, 45, and 46, dealing with subdivision regulations and street design specifications.
Move for approval.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on January 28, 2010, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 29 subdivisions, maps, and plats, Section 29, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, dealing with subdivision regulations and street design specifications. Notice of said public hearing was published in the February 14, 2010 issue of the local newspaper.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This last ordinance is probably the ordinance that contains the most changes before you tonight, with dealing with Section 29 on subdivisions, maps, and plats. This ordinance will adopt the guidelines set forth for subdividing our land, creating plats, and generating maps to be consistent with the new subdivision regulations and street specifications. It expands upon the purpose of the ordinance and clearly defines streets, Also, repurified water mains has been added, which were not available in 1974, and have now been added to these codes. In addition, this change implements the same approval timeframes and processes for both preliminary plats and final plats. Before, preliminary plats were not even addressed in the code. Also, the code on the water supply system and sanitary sewers has been modernized, falling in line with the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department policies, procedures, and general design requirements, so some technical changes had to be made in our city code to meet some of those policies that have been set forth, dealing with things such as water line sizes, developer responsibilities, et cetera. Performance sureties are also addressed to guarantee improvements in our new developments, as well as minimum development requirements prior to issuance of building permits, and also certificates of occupancy. And 1- and 2-family subdivisions have now been differentiated out from other subdivisions pertaining to requirements necessary prior to receiving building permits in those areas as well. The ownership and acceptance of public infrastructure is clearly outlined, and we've also added that subdivisions in the CUD water service area must also meet City of Murfreesboro fire requirements. Finally, the ordinance addresses the city's drainage ways, how they should be treated, how they should be protected, and the penalties set forth if they are unlawfully encroached upon. I think that rounds out the majority of the ordinance proposed changes in that chapter. And again, the planning department and the legal staff are available to answer any questions you may have. This did pass by unanimous vote at the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Logan? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time, and anyone wishing to speak for or against these amendments to subdivision maps and plats, please step to the microphone. Give us your name and address, please. Is anyone here wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to amend Chapter 29, Subdivision Maps and Plats, Section 29-1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, dealing with subdivision regulations and street design specifications.
Move for its passage.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Everett.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by the City Council on January the 28th, 2010, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider amending Sections 7, 18, and 27 regarding site plan review enhancements. Notice of said public hearing was published in the February 14th, 2010 issue of the local newspaper.
Thank you. The final amendment before you tonight relates to site plans and addresses Sections 7, 18, and 27 of the Murfreesboro zoning ordinance. These amendments are in response to the wishes of the Planning Commission and the City Council to look at ways to receive quality development found in some of our planned development districts and our gateway design overlay districts throughout all site plans throughout the city, and also trying to move away from reliance on or heavily reliance on planned development districts. These are just incorporating some of the aspects that we have been utilizing in those districts throughout. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this item in December, and at that time received a lot of support for this from various members of the community, of the design and development community, but they did propose a few changes to the ordinance. Staff went back and made those changes and took it back to the Planning Commission, at which time it was voted upon and was approved unanimously for these changes. I will outline for you the majority of the changes include taking our site plan review checklist and trying to make it easier for our developer and design engineers to follow, numbering it differently and trying to make it a little more user-friendly, adding the information and requirement for a photometric plan, which would just be an initial photometric plan for all commercial site plans, going in and codifying information about foundation plantings, and we haven't specified what types of foundation plantings would be required. Most developments are already doing this, but trying to leave that open so that designers have the freedom and the creative ability to go in and address these areas. Screening of unsightly mechanical equipment such as HVAC units, transformers, etc., and also submitting preliminary architectural plans at the Planning Commission stage, but would not have to submit any type of mechanical floor plans, mechanical plans, plumbing plans, et cetera. It would just be a preliminary elevation, and those plans would, the full set of architectural plans wouldn't be required until the building permit. That's current practice as is. Many of these are a lot of these things the development community is already practicing. This is just an opportunity to try to put it into the code before you tonight. We feel like the site plan enhancements is trying to move forward in that direction. Staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
All right, any questions for Ms. Logan on this resolution? Actually, it's not a resolution, it's on this amendment. Excuse me. Any questions? If there are no questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. And if anyone is here wishing to speak for or against these amendments regarding site plan review enhancements, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to amend Appendix A zoning, Sections 7, 18, and 27 pertaining to site plan review enhancements.
Mayor,
Mr. Young.
the Planning Commission took a very cautious attitude about this. We wanted to get a tremendous amount of input from the stakeholders and the community on this. I think we did that. We've got some definite improvements on this, some simplifications to make it easier and more customer and user-friendly in this particular matter. I think we're seeing some good improvements on our site plans. I think it's a very good improvement to our documents that people have to use every day in the city. So with that, I'll move for approval.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? If not, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Logan.
Thank you.
Are there any beer permits to be considered?
Yes, Mayor, we have two tonight. New Salem Smoke Shop is a convenience store on New Salem Highway. They have met all of our requirements. And then we have a restaurant that's going to be opening up at the mall, 1720 Oakport Parkway, that they plan to open before we meet again, and they lack their final inspections. When they get those done, then they will have met our requirements for their approval as well.
All right. All of these meet the requirements, subject to Ms. Wright's explanation. Is there a motion that we accept?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have before you a list of the statements to be considered for payment. You've had an opportunity to review those. Are there any questions?
Mayor, I move we pay all the bills.
As opposed to some of them.
As opposed.
As opposed to some of them.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and second to pay the statements. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. I do not have any appointments to announce tonight. Do you have any, Mr. Lyons?
No, sir.
All right. Is there any other business to come from the staff or council before the council? If there's no other business, you're adjourned.